folks, John Cordisco back again with another great chess video for you. This is game 10 of the World Championship chess match between current World Champion Vishy Anand and challenger Magnus Carlsen. Now, unfortunately, I haven't been updated my videos like I usually do, so I'm sure everybody knows by now that Carlsen won the championship. So this is the last game of the series. I did it because it's like a missing tooth. You can't have one game missing. This is game 10. So I'll kind of go through it a little quick because we all know what happened. But Magnus is white, Vishy Anand is black. E4, C5 is going to be a Sicilian Moscow variation. D6, bishop checks, knight, D4, C takes, queen takes. I noticed Magnus has been playing queen takes on the Sicilian, retaking the pawn on D4 instead of the knight. A6, bishop takes, bishop takes. Now, I go against the Sicilian quite often as white. I don't care for it. I'm going against it, but I thought I gave up that light squared bishop awful quick. But obviously this is all theory. C4, which I like a lot. Look at those central squares the white pawns control. It's kind of almost a Maroczy bind setup. Knight F6, bishop G5, E6, knight, bishop, white castles, bishop C6. The old cardinal rule, this time I had to be broken, moving the same piece twice in the opening, but I think that was worth the loss of tempo. Queen to D3. Get the queen out of fire. Castle. Knight to D4. That was the reason why the queen moved. You get that knight to that nice central square attacking the light squared bishop. Rook C8. The only semi-open file for black. Makes perfect sense. B3. Now, even though I do like black's setup here, a non-setup, he's a little cramped, but I don't think it's overpoweringly cramped where he just can't move around. He's just having trouble. He only has some here back. And it's just technically cramped, but I don't think it's bad for black at all. Queen to C7. Knight takes, queen takes, rook A C1 to get the rook on the same file as the queen. H6, kicking the bishop, bishop comes back. Knight, bishop D4. He's got that bishop pointing right at black's. I think he's trying to provoke the pawn to E5 move, which he won't do, of course. Rook F to D8, H3. That move I don't really understand. Maybe I'll call it a pass move for lack of a better term. Queen to C7, rook to D1. Queen A5. Off screen I've got my Fritz 13 computer running. It's about a quarter of a pawn advantage for white, so it's the same as even. Queen to D2. And this is a move I don't understand at all. King to F8. That one I don't get, frankly. Sometimes in the positions, if the knight is here and the bishop is here, the king can guard the bishop if the knight moves, but there's no bishop hitting the knight. I don't understand. Queen to B2. Of course, now we see this nice diagonal here. And now he goes back. Queen to G8 or king to G8. I don't understand those losses of tempos. Maybe somebody that's a better player than I could explain here in the comments section. A4. Queen to H5. He's bringing the queen over to the other side. Knight to E2. Bishop F6. Rook C3. He's going for a rook lift. Bishop takes. Rook takes. Queen E5. The position is fairly equal right now. I really don't like the effect of the rook. The queens are right here in this diagonal, but who am I to question Magnus Carlsen? Queen to D2. Going after the D6 pawn. Knight to F6. Which indirectly guards the pawn. because now the knight moves, the rook can protect the pawn on d6. Rook to e3. After rook to e3, rook d7, a5, trying to pick up some space on the queen side, basically freezing this pawn here. And this is where I think Anand stumbles. Some suggested moves by the computer are king to h8, king to h7, and king to f8. Just move the king. Just shuffle. I think Anand gets a little ambitious here and goes queen to g5. And that jumps from a half pawn advantage for white to almost 2 pawns immediately. I think g6 was interesting to look at. After queen to g5, e5. That was the move that Anand for some reason didn't see. Now he's in trouble. Knight to e8, just to protect the pawn. E takes. Knight to g3 was worth considering too, I think, instead of taking. After takes, rook to c6, hitting the pawn again. f4. Here comes white's pawns. Queen to d8. Now black's on his heels again, with a pawn stuck on the 6th rank. Rook to double up. Now this is where we get a massive exchange. Instead of taking, if knight takes, double question mark, this is what would have happened. b4, knight takes, rook takes, queen takes, rook takes, knight takes, rook takes, and white's up a piece. Rook takes, again, no knight takes, that's bad. Rook takes, queen takes, knight takes. Now, this is one of the oxymorons in chess, that the less amount of pieces there are on the board, the more complicated it is. Now here we are with pawns on both sides of the board, even pawns, 6 and 6, and it's a knight pawn ending. These endings for me are maddening. They just make you crazy, all the different combinations with the knight moves. Anyway, knight to f2. Now comes the king, which is a powerful piece in the endgame. King f8. King, 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 king. Here we go. Now we got the kings facing off on each other. Knight to c3. I'm going to go through these moves here. You can just pause the video because these knight pawn endings are just crazy trying to figure it out. Knight to f5. Knight to e4. Knight to e3. I think Magnus thinks at this point the game is drawn. If he can draw this game, he becomes world champion. But he doesn't hold back, I'll give him that. g3, f5, knight, g5, knight checks, king d7, knight checks, king e7, knight to g8 check. Knight to h5 might have been interesting because after king to d7, b4. King f8, knight takes, g takes, g takes, king g7. This is where Magnus tries something here. I think it was worth doing. Knight takes. Now he sacrificed the knight. But if you look at this now, these pawns are awful vulnerable over here. King to b6. Here comes the white king. Magnus is still going for the win, even though he only needs a draw. Knight to g2. King takes, knight takes, king takes, knight. King to b6, f4, a6. Here goes the a pawn. f3, a7, f2, queen, queen. Now they're back with queens on the board. Here comes the craziness. Queen to d5. Great spot for that queen. Great central square. Queen to e1. Oddly enough, the 3 pawns for the piece, even when the computer is dead even now. I mean dead even, 0.00. Queen queen to d6, queen to e3 check, king moves. I'll just go the next few moves here. King b5, after king to b5, knight takes, queen checks, king moves, queen checks, forcing the trade of queens, queen takes, king takes, king h5, and this is kind of funny on Magnus's part. He moves the pawn up one, king takes, and then he pushes c5, forcing the knight to take, and the game is drawn. That means Magnus Carlsen is now the new world champion. As Danny King from England said on his video concerning this match, the king is dead, long live the king. So this is it for Vishy, at least for now. We'll see if he can come back in the candidates. Vishy's had a really good run. He's a great player. Gosh, you know, it's funny when you get older. Even Kasparov was losing it a little bit. When you hit a certain age, your calculation skills start. I think Vishy had a little bit of lack of confidence in this case. And it's too bad, because he's actually a good guy. But Magnus is Magnus, and Magnus is a pretty good kid too. So there's always change in every sport, no matter what it is. There's always a new number one. You can't be number one forever. So now the reign of Vishy Anand is now ended, and the new reign of Magnus Carlsen is beginning. Now, just for a little editorial comment, my understanding is all the different websites, even including social media concerning this match, there are over 1 billion views. Let me say that again, 1 billion views on this match. This got more publicity than the Fischer-Spassky match, which I watched as a boy. If there was internet back in 1972, there would have been 2 or 3 billion people, at least views, watching it. This is the most watched match, what I call in the modern era, the internet era. We'll see what Magnus does. He's from a small country, but he's very popular around the world. I think this will do nothing but bring chess to a lot of younger people, which will bring the game up dramatically. So congratulations to Magnus Carlsen, the new world champion. It'd be interesting to see the next candidates championship if Kramnik makes it through to play Magnus. Kramnik's kind of in between the old school Kasparov era and the new school of Magnus. Kramnik's kind of in the middle. He's not old, but he's not young, and he's still got a lot of his skills. Anyway, folks, that's the last video of this series on the World Championship. I hope you enjoyed them. I want you to remember, if you think chess is just a game, you're not playing it right. Take care, folks. Bye-bye.